My name is Daniel Picot, and I'm here with,
Brianna Proenza.
and we want to talk about the effect of sexual harassment on women and their mental health. What is sexual harassment? Well, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission defines sexual harassment as unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal and physical conduct of a sexual nature, including verbal sexual harassment, unwelcome sexual touching, cybersexual harassment, being physically followed, unwanted genital fashion, and sexual assault, as well as many other kinds of sexual assault and harassment. Let me ask you something, Brianna. How often do you think women get sexually harassed?
I think they get sexually harassed very often, almost every day, if not every day.
That aligns with some of the data that we have, saying that 81% of women have been sexually harassed, and 13% of women get sexually harassed every single day. Let me ask you another question. Have you ever been sexually harassed yourself?
Yes, I have.
And have you ever been sexually harassed in public?
Yes.
At work?
Yes.
In school?
Yes.
Sexual harassment.
I feel like after any instance of sexual harassment, a woman kind of puts her guard up and just kind of approaches a situation more cautiously, or approaches an environment that they know is more male-dominated more cautiously. So I think that it really affected me in the way that I plan my day-to-day activities, or the way that I plan where I'm going to walk, or where I'm going to sit, or who I'm going to talk to.
For you, what does sexual harassment look like?
Sexual harassment can look like many things. I think that sexual harassment takes many forms. You can verbally sexually harass somebody, physically sexually harass somebody. You can do it through the internet. You can do it in person. It's very complex. It's a very complex idea, and I think that it can take many forms.
How do you think these instances have affected your mental health?
I think me, like many women that have been sexually harassed or sexually assaulted, look at relationships with men very differently. We take a more cautious approach to making these relationships and forming these relationships, because as a woman that has been sexually harassed multiple times, you really never know the intentions of a man or why they want to talk to you. So it's better to be safe than sorry, unfortunately, when it comes to being a woman.
And that changes the effect of the relationships that you have with men. How about yourself? How do you feel mentally when these things happen? How do these experiences shape the way you think or feel?
I mean, it can be traumatic even. I feel like mentally, when somebody gets sexually harassed, it's not something that is flattering or something that is nice to say to anybody, even if what somebody is saying can be considered a compliment in a man's eyes. But to a woman, that might just make the person feel dirty, or it might make them feel like their only worth is their body, or is that's the only thing that they have to offer. And it just creates a negative stigma, I feel like, in young girls' brains, when all that they're being correlated to is their bodies. And I feel like that's just how men view women nowadays. They sexualize women, and that's why they think sexual harassment can be okay or acceptable.
Do you feel, so you're basically saying that when men sexually harass women, it reduces them to sexual objects?
Yes.
And how do you feel as far as safety? How do you feel as far as safety wherever you've been harassed, wherever you've been assaulted?
Well, the safety aspect of things goes back to, you never know the intentions of a man, or what they could be able to do to you. So you don't really, as women, you're taught to not really fight back when you're being sexually harassed verbally. But you never know whether a man that's sexually harassing you verbally will take it to a physical level. And you always have to be kind of on edge, because you never know if a man is gonna take that silence of you not responding back to his sexual advances as an okay for him to physically touch you.
That fear and anxiety have been reflected very well with other women. 31% of women feel anxious or depressed when after being sexually harassed. 23% change their route or regular routine. So if you're being sexually harassed in public or in a certain place where you can avoid, you do everything you can to avoid it, right?
Yes.
And 15% have ended relationships, such as friendships or romantic relationships. As you said, there were many relationships that you had with men, as in general, as well as, I imagine, individual relationships that you might have had to cut off just to help yourself.
Well, as a woman, I feel like you have to really pick and choose who you allow to be around you, or who you allow to personally be in a space where you're not very protected. I think that it's really important for people to teach men how to protect and look after women instead of sexualizing them or viewing them as objects the way that society has really trained men to do nowadays.
Absolutely, I agree. And I don't think men realize that these moments can be extremely traumatic. According to the Discovery Mood and Anxiety Program, studies have shown that 1 in 3 women admit to being victims of workplace sexual harassment, and 65% of all women have experienced street harassment. And what people don't realize is that these things have an effect on the mind, such as a traumatic or distressing event occurring. It can overwhelm a normal coping mechanisms as a result, as the memory and associated stimuli are inadequately processed and stored in isolated memory network. It is almost as if the brain is rewired to focus only on the traumatic event and its associated emotions, as if the event were constantly in repeat on the brain. When this occurs, these memories will have long-lasting effects and will be repeated over and over if the individual is re-experiencing the trauma for the first time, because the sounds, smells, images, and feelings were not adequately processed and stored.
I think the statistics that you just stated are pretty valid, just because personally being a woman that has been subjected to workplace sexual harassment, sometimes you feel really helpless because your abuser might even be your own employer, and then you get put in a situation where you feel very defenseless and you feel like you can't really stand up to your employer, because you might be in a situation where this job is the only way that you can pay bills or you can put food on the table. So I feel like women are put in a lot of these situations where they really do feel helpless and they feel like they can turn to nobody, especially when it comes to workplace harassment, and that can turn into a very dangerous situation for any woman.
Like I said, this is a problem that permeates the whole workforce. 38% of women said they experienced sexual harassment at the workplace, and this permeates across every industry, across many sectors. And it, like you said, it could be very damaging to even the company. These facts are highlighted by the statistics coming from the U.S. military, stating that 23,000 estimated members of the U.S. military have experienced sexual assault within the last year. 34% of men who were sexually assaulted describe assault as hazing in the U.S. military, and an estimated 116,000 active component service members were sexually harassed in the past year, 97% of which being women. Going back on the mental effects of sexual harassment, how do you think these instances that you described have affected you long term?
I think a lot has happened since being sexually harassed and things of that nature. I think that I view my relationships with men very differently, and I tend to not really share a lot of my emotions with people. I tend to keep my guard up, and that includes people other than just men. It includes like family members and friends and people I thought I could confide in, because when you're sexually harassed by people around you, you tend to lose trust in the people that are closest to you. So you want to stay quiet or not really speak out about the experiences that you've had, just because you're in fear of rejection or being victim blamed and people telling you that it's your fault that you got sexually harassed or things like that.
That could be extremely damaging to someone's psyche or ideas of self-esteem, especially being dismissed when something clearly makes you upset. That could definitely hurt someone's self-esteem. We know that sexual harassment can happen at any age, but it it's very saddening to see that 4% of women can be sexually harassed from 0 to 5 years old, 10% from 6 to 10 years old, 16% being from 11 to 13 years old, and the majority of sexual harassment goes to the 14 through 7-year-olds, the 17-year-olds, and 50% to 18 to 22-year-olds, and then 23 and over is about 30%. It's extremely disturbing that that most sexual harassment is done to women that are under 17 years old. It could only be inferred that due to the age of these women, that the nature of these infer that these instances have had long-lasting effects victims because they were so young and built an understanding around those traumatic events. Brenna, can I ask you about an experience that you might have had in being sexually harassed in public?
Yes. One afternoon I was walking alone, and I was in a pretty nice neighborhood, but that didn't stop the fact from a group of boys calling me out and saying things like nice hips or making comments about my body, which made me feel extremely uncomfortable to the point that I didn't want to walk alone anymore.
Doing something like not being able to walk, that must be extremely impactful for you. Walking to school was your main form of transportation, right?
Yes.
And did you have to change the way you acted and the way your behavior just because of these instances?
Most definitely. So after these events, I tended to either try and get a ride to school or try and find a group of people that I could walk with, just so that I could feel safer, or I could feel like I could avoid sexual advances from groups of people.
This must have been extremely difficult and such an inconvenient experience. And what can you recommend to a sexual harassment victim?
In my experience, I've learned that nothing gets resolved in staying quiet. So the most important part about fighting sexual harassment and making sure sexual harassment doesn't occur again is being very vocal about it. So women, I feel like, are taught from a very young age to stay quiet or to avoid making remarks about sexual harassment, or to speak up to men in control or in controlling situations. But I feel like it's very important to call these men out and to make sure that they're being held accountable for the actions that they're taking, because they're actions that aren't okay. And if you're feeling uncomfortable, you should voice that. You shouldn't feel ever like you need to restrain yourself to keep a job, or restrain yourself to make people around you feel more comfortable, because if you're uncomfortable in a situation, that's the most important thing that you need to be expressing to the people around you.
And what would you say to the men to stop them from committing sexual assault, harassment?
I mean, there's not much that you can tell a man to stop sexually harassing women. It's mainly comes back to teaching men when they're young, teaching boys that it's not okay to sexually harass women. It's not okay to view women as sexual objects. It's not okay for the media to be doing what they're doing with women's imagery and women's like sexual imagery and things of that nature. I feel like you need to teach young boys to protect women and to make sure that they're there for women, and create a open and inviting environment for women, rather than creating a very hostile and dangerous environment for women, because I feel like that's what the media portrays the most nowadays.
Okay, thank you very much. I also would like to include that there are many resources online, such as the RAINN.org, which is a national sexual assault hotline, the Legal Network for Gender Equity, and Futures Without Violence. That there are many resources online that are very worth finding. I would like to thank you very much, Brianna, for coming here and talking to us about sexual harassment and providing your input. I hope one day you could come again and we could discuss this further.
Thank you, Daniel.